Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Um, Welcome. We're going to be talking about designing an incident response process at scale today. Yeah, my main advice for this talk is to make sure that you get the general overview of what I'm trying to say, and why an incident response process is important. I'm going to be going through a bit quickly because I don't have a lot of time. But I'm going to try my best to make sure that like everyone can understand at a very, very fundamental level what like the main points are and why this is important. Right, so let's get started. Who am I? My name is Opeyemi. I'm a systems reliability engineer at Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a service that provides, well, we have a lot of products, but we are most popular for our CDN services and our DDoS protection services. Um, my job as a site reliability engineer or systems reliability engineer is to think about reliability, to build systems that make sure that the company is reliable. And before that, I was at Paystack where I helped set up the observability team, which kind of also ties into a lot of thinking about reliability. Yeah, I have like hobbies I won't bore you with, but hopefully I'll get a panda soon. Right. So in this talk, we're going to talk about designing an incident response process, right? But before doing that, I want to introduce a brief theoretical model of resilience. I think is important because resilience is concerned with how we recover from disruptions, right? And um, designing a process pretty much helps with the resilience of your company. And then we're going to talk about what incident response is, and then how to design and optimize the process. We're not going to talk about a couple of things. I just want to be clear about that from the get-go. We're not going to talk about security incident response because the sensitive nature of security incidents makes it have a whole other separate process. So we're not going to talk about that. We're mostly going to be focused on product incidents. We're not going to do an intro to site reliability engineering. I want to mention this because I might use some SRE terms, but when I use them, I'm going to make sure to call them out and explain what they are so you don't get lost. We're also not going to be talking about setting up, monitoring, and observability because I can spend 5 hours talking about this. But there's a section in the talk that we're going to mention this, and I'm just not going to go very deep, it just be an overview. We're also not going to talk about troubleshooting. This talk is about designing the process, right? And troubleshooting is just a part of that process. So again, I'm just going to mention it, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. Yes, so I want to start with a quote because um, all the talks I've seen, most of the talks I've seen that like I'm inspired by start with quotes, and I want you guys to think I'm smart. The reason I chose this quote is I think this quote is a strong indicator that the systems we build are so complex, or they are getting so complex that we are starting to think more about how we handle failures. Richard Cook is a researcher that gave a talk about the theoretical resilience model that I'm going to talk about. And yeah, I just find it really, really interesting. Right, so we are getting started now. The reason I want to talk about this theoretical model is, like I mentioned in the introduction, resilience is the ability to mitigate and recover from disruption in our engineering systems, right? And this model is important in this context because I want to use this model to help us, like the audience, understand how an incident response process can move you further away from incidents. People think about incident response in the sense of, oh, things are broken, let me just fix them. But an incident response process will also help you not have these incidents as much as you're currently having them. So the model is used to depict how close your systems are to having an accident, which is an incident in this case. And it also helps you find a balance between economic and engineering goals, which I think everyone will find valuable. You can also use this model to, when you're trying to convince your company to design an incident response process. So this is what the model looks like. Sorry if the diagram is a bit small. I have edited diagrams in the next slides. So there are three boundaries, right? So the first boundary is the economic failure boundary, and this is concerned with like business concerns. The business wants to cut costs. The business wants to be effective. The business wants to have profits, right? Um, So that's what the economic failure boundary is. The unacceptable workload boundary is, for the purposes of this talk, is engineering concerns. So engineering um, wants to have a lot of outputs without making without making a strong amount of effort, right? Just to save engineering time, and especially like if you have hiring problems. And then the accident boundary is where accidents happen. Um, so these two boundaries, the economic failure boundary and the unacceptable workload boundary, show how like pressure from both sides push the company's operating point towards the accident boundary. So the operating point is where the company currently is in terms of how close they are to accidents, right? So these two pressures kind of push you towards incidents. So you are constantly in a position where you are getting closer and closer to this incident. And then you have to start thinking about it, because if you don't, you just realize that you're starting to have more and more incidents that you have to resolve. Right. So I've been saying incidents. So I don't want to assume that we all understand what an incident is. I would like to define an incident for clarity. So to me, an incident is any situation that adversely affects a company's ability to service customers. The most serious incidents obviously have like impact on revenue. I think a very good example of an incident was Facebook. Um, Facebook went down in 2021, and because Facebook was down, WhatsApp was down, Instagram was down, and then text messages went unsent, voice notes were unheard, like all hell pretty much broke loose. It turned out to be a low-level networking problem, and Facebook wouldn't have been able to solve this um, incident, or they wouldn't have been able to resolve this incident without a proper incident response process. Right. So based on my experience, I have worked in small startups, I have worked in mid-sized companies, and now I'm working in a large company. I want to use a theoretical company as an example. So let's say we have company Y, which is a small startup. They only have one engineer, right? And let's say they just have the CEO and the CTO. The way incidents are handled in this company is customers usually notify about issues, and then the CEO reaches out to the CTO, who, as a single engineer, hopefully a boss, solves the incidents, right? The mean time to resolve is the amount of time it takes to resolve incidents, right? The mean time to resolve in this case is very high, but it can also vary because it relies on only one person, right? So it depends on how the person is feeling. If the person is having a bad day, it might take longer to resolve, right? And then obviously, because this is a small startup and um, the pressures from the two boundaries, the economic and the unacceptable workload boundary, are very high in this case. So a very good example of pressure from the unacceptable workload boundary is you just want to engineer. There is no code review, right? So there's a lot of corner cutting. The CTO might just go to the server and like deploy directly, right? So obviously that pushes you closer towards having accidents, right? And then the economic section, right? The CEO just wants to have to be alive, to be afloat, so that they can raise money in the next round. So this company is always close to the internet, and they decide to scale. Yeah, let's hire more engineers. And you'd generally think that because you generally think that because they've hired more engineers, that this is going to get better. They're going to get faster at solving incidents, which is unfortunately not the case. I've seen this happen where the mean time to resolve goes even higher when you hire more engineers, because for various reasons, which I've tried to articulate here. The first reason is there is now disjointed effort, right? There is no process. So when a problem happens, there is a scattered approach. Like every engineer on the team just tries to go do what they think is right. Sometimes you have duplicated work streams, right? People try to do what they think is the right thing to do, and they end up doing the exact same thing as someone else. Because there is inadequate communication, right? It's difficult to tell customers what is happening when you in your company you're not even sure what is happening, right? Obviously, it takes longer to resolve because of the duplication of effort and a lack of like order and structure. Obviously, you also have a negative public perception because your lack of communication will frustrate your customers. You can't tell them what is going on. And then because you're frustrating your customers, you're going to lose them and you're going to lose revenue. Right. So I have spent this time trying to set up the process, right? So trying to set up the problem, right? I think it's very, very important for us to understand why we're doing this, right? Before talking about how to actually do it. So yeah, now we're going into how to do it. I have an 8-step process here on how to design the incident response process. So numbers 1 to 6 pretty much help prepare you for number 7. Number 7 is where you actually set up the actual procedures you're going to use for resolving the incident, right? So yeah, let's get into it. The first thing to do is to understand the nature of incidents. I have 2 natures of incidents I'm going to talk about today. So the first nature is an incident severity. So in my experience, this has been called different things in different companies, right? Some companies call it severity, some companies call it priority, but it kind of means the same thing. So the nature of the incident, right, in this case, if I'm using severities, right, it's step 1 to step 5. Step 1 to 3 are the serious incidents that require an incident response process. And then step 4 and 5 are like more minor that don't really require a process. So yeah, step 1 is obviously the highest priority. It's usually stuff that affects the entire platform, right? You typically require multiple teams to resolve this because I mean it's an all hands on deck situation. An example of this is like the database going down, right, and the entire platform cannot be used. Step 2 is also a significant problem, but it only affects like a subset of users in production. This might require only a single team. And an example of this is a company has multiple products, like Cloudflare, for example. One of those products goes down. It usually requires only the team that is responsible for that product to resolve the incident. And then step 3 is a minor problem, right? But then it causes impact for some users. So an example of this is customers or users in a specific region having elevated errors or having degraded throughput or something. So that's what step 3 is. And then step 4 is a minor, right? And doesn't really cause impact for users. So an example of this is, let's say you have a cluster of servers, right, on Amazon. And then one of those servers goes down. But then because you have a cluster, you fall back, right? And it doesn't really cause any impact to your users. But you might want to look into it so it doesn't spread or so it doesn't happen again, pretty much. And then step 5 is the lowest priority. Usually requires only a ticket to fix, to be honest. And an example of this is when let's say you have a broken link on your marketing website, so you just create a ticket to fix it. Right. The second nature of incident is the incident state. There are 4 states I think are very important for you to have. Depending on your company, you might have multiple other states, right? The one key thing to note about incident response in general is everything depends on your company and the nature of your company, right? These states, these rules are just like a foundation for you to take and go along and soar and fly, right? So the first state is investigating, like you just got notified of the incident, the team is aware, and you're investigating what went wrong. The next state is when the root cause has been identified, right? In this state, you're usually like implementing a fix. And then monitoring is when you've implemented the fix, you are monitoring to see if there's any further impact or to see if the issue has been resolved, right? And then resolved is where we all want to be, right? The impact has been resolved, all systems are operational. Having an understanding of these states is important because you will use these states to communicate with your customers when you have an incident. So I'm going to talk about the status page in one of the coming slides, and this is very important for that. Thankfully, most of the tools you will use for communication already have these things written into them. So again, you don't need to feel pressure to memorize or to know what the states are at every point in time. You can also always come back to it. Right. So step two, after understanding what the states of what the nature of the incident should be, step two is to now decide on what the severities of incident should be for your company, right? Um, Based on, you can call it severity, you can call it priority. It's really up to you. But um, based on the severities, right, you can now start to map incidents, what incidents would have what severities, right? Um, One thing here, one very important thing here is do not feel pressure to get the severity right from the jump. It's better to be wrong than not to declare an incident, right? So you should have like an open culture in your company where um, people are not afraid to to get the severity wrong, right? So in this step, right, this is you setting up the foundation for the company to know what is a very serious incident. So this is where you are going to say, these are the servers I have, these are the products I have. If this goes wrong with this product, this is a Sev 1, this is a Sev 2, that kind of thing. Um, Again, like you can look at the examples of severities and like map it to your company. But yeah, this is the next important step. Then the next thing is, now that you have your severities, right, your monitoring and alerting should reflect those severities. So your monitoring is what checks your system to see if anything goes wrong, and alerting should is when you get notified about the problems, right? So obviously, all your alerts you have the right severity. If you have a service that is critical that triggers only a set 4 alerts, then you have a very serious problem on your hands. Then again, like I mentioned, only Sev 1 to Sev 3 incidents. Sev 3 incidents you have like a full response process. One other important thing here is you have, especially in companies that have a lot of services, right? You need these services to be cataloged with their right priorities. So it's clear to anyone that sees this service to know that it's important. You might it's very easy to rely on people's experience to know, oh yes, this I remember this service, it's important. But you might have cases where like a new engineer joins and is just handling incident response for the first time. You need to be able to catalog these services to know that, yeah, this is an important service. And then you should have run books for what the response should be for those services. So run books are like, when this happens, this is what you do, pretty much. That kind of takes away the manual pressure of trying to figure out what you need to do and stuff like that. And it helps like speed up your response to incidents as well. And then the last thing is you should generally have your alerting catch general availability issues, right? And assign the highest priority to that. So there is this monitoring tool called Datadog that we used heavily at Paystack. It has this thing called synthetics monitoring, where you can ping your services from outside, right? That helps you know when your service is down from outside. And it's really important. And if your like entire service is down, then no one can use it. You should not rely on people tweeting or people going on social media to say, "Oh, what's up? Paystack is down." So that's also important as well. And obviously, those alerts should have the highest severity possible. All right. So the next thing is you now need to establish your incident responder roles. This is important because it helps people know what they should be doing at each point in the incident, right? You don't want to rely on people's know-how or people's intuition, because in this scenario, you want to avoid people having to be superheroes as much as you can. Superhero syndrome is a very big no-no. If you have lots of situations where people have to be superheroes during your incident response, you have a very big problem. So the first role is the incident commander role. So this role is, in my opinion, the most important role, right? Because this is the person primarily responsible for resolving the incident. So what the incident commander does is he or she coordinates others to resolve the incident. And then this role is usually fulfilled by engineering leaders, right? So managers, tech leads, sometimes directors. I've seen a wide range. And then the incident commander usually just interfaces with the subject matter experts, right? Who can do the actual troubleshooting and can do the actual remediation steps, right? So yeah, subject matter experts are usually the engineers on the teams. It can be the infrastructure team or a product team. And then they are the ones that like, can actually actively troubleshoot and like do any remediation steps that are needed. Then the scribe, you don't see this often, but I think the scribe is a very, very important role. So the scribe's role is to note down every relevant piece of information, right? All the decisions made, because communication can happen in a ton of different places, right? You can have chat, you can have video, right? So the scribe's role is to note everything down, because when you're writing your incident report about how the incident was handled and how you want to improve in the future, this piece of information will be important. And also when you're communicating, like say to external stakeholders or to even management as well. So yeah, this scribe role, I have seen this handled by a wide range of different types of people. I've seen this handled by the incident commander. So the incident commander might just be asking, might be scribing as well. It can be an engineer, it can be someone from customer success, it can be anything. So this just depends on your company and what you need. And then the liaison is also a very important role. The liaison communicates with both your internal and external stakeholders to give updates, right? So this is the person that is responsible for making sure that your customers know what's happening, that your customers know what the incident states are, what the incident severity is, what exactly is wrong. Um, it's not that like the liaison goes around like a town crier, like banging a drum, telling everyone what's happening. There are tools that the liaison should be using to communicate. Like I mentioned, the status page. Um, these are the tools that the liaison will just put in the information about the incident as well. It's important that this responsibility is about communicating not only with the external stakeholders, like the customers. It's also important to communicate with the internal stakeholders. So not everyone will be able to join the incident room. So it's important for people in the company to know what's happening as well. And obviously, they can have more information about the sensitive nature of the incident. Step 5 is to set up on-call schedules, right? Hopefully you already have on-call schedules at your company, but if you don't, and depending on the size of your company as well, an on-call schedule is pretty much like a rotation where one member of the team responds to alerts, or in this case, incidents for a certain duration, right? So it can be 3 days, it can be 1 week. You just know that if an alert is triggered, this is the person that receives it. You can also have escalation policies where someone is primary, someone is secondary, and then maybe the tertiary or whatever goes to an executive. My advice here is to create an on-call schedule for each incident response role. So for the commander, for everyone, right? Because when an incident happens, you need to now check who is on call. That's the person that will answer the issue. Again, this also helps fight superhero syndrome, where like specific people are the ones responding to incidents all the time, because it also helps like spread the experience across your teams as well. And then it prevents burnout for like your superheroes. PagerDuty is a really good tool for this. So PagerDuty is a tool that does incident response in general. I'm not obviously not going to go into detail about it, but if you're interested, shameless plug, my good friend Ibukun has a course called PagerDuty, Incident Response PagerDuty on LinkedIn. I'm going to share I'm going to share links, right, to these resources that you can use to learn more about these things. Next is to set up communication channels, right? You can't resolve an incident if you can't communicate within your team. So this is usually like both chat and video. So chat is really important because it helps get a structure, right, to your incident. My recommendation for chat is to, first of all, have a room called the incident announcements room. This is where people can subscribe to see, yes, an incident is happening. So whenever a message is sent to that room, um, an incident has been declared. And then inside the incident announcements room are now individual links to individual chat rooms as well. So each incident should have a dedicated like chat room. And then the thread should also be organized, right, into different things that you need at your company. This also depends on your company. So what I would advise is you can have in the incidents channel, you can have a debugging thread, you can have a communications thread, and then you can have a follow-up slash prevents thread as well. I think that is really important because if you have just a single, like this example of this Slack demo, if you have just a single thread where everyone is talking about the incident, people are going to come in, like customer success is going to come into that thread to ask for updates. It's going to disrupt the flow of the incident. So if everything is organized properly, right, into the threads the threads into specific threads, right? Anyone that needs updates can go into the communications thread. Anyone that is looking into debugging can go into the debugging thread. And then video all depends on like how serious the incident is, how best communication is going to work for that incident. You might have video for cases where chat just isn't working for you. And then for external communication, I've been mentioning status page. A status page is a way to show your customers what is the general health and availability of your platform, right? This example is Paystack status page. I spent a couple of years trying to make sure that this status page is green, and I'm a big fan of Paystack. So yeah, another shameless plug. This status page should also have like a history of your past incidents. So if you go to status.paystack.com, you see the entire history of the incidents that have happened, and should also include like brief incident reports of what happened and how it was resolved. So that's like external for your customers to have confidence that you actually know what you're doing. Like you didn't just when the incident happened, you didn't just go and scream into the void, right? You actually took steps, and you need to show them that this is not going to happen again, which should also be included in the messaging. Right. So we've gone through 1 to 6, which I just help us for this step, right? This is the main thing, right? This is how you actually set up the process. This is how you actually resolve incidents, right? So there are various steps. And again, do not memorize this. This is advice. Your particular incident response process is going to depend on your team and what you need. Your steps, I have 7, right? But yours might be 8. Yours might be 3. Yours should not be 3. But yours might be 5, 6, right? But yeah, the first thing is when an issue happens, right? Someone gets paged that the database is down, right? That person needs to determine the severity of the incident. You need to decide, is this a step 2? Is this a step 3? Again, my main advice here is please try to make sure that people in your company are not afraid to declare incidents, right? If you're afraid to declare an incident, then the amount of time it takes to dilly-dally and try to make sure you get it right, that's that amount of time is customers having issues, right? And the amount of time it takes, the longer it takes, pretty much. So yeah, the severity determines the amount of attention required. So even if the severity is wrong at first, it can be changed, right? So don't worry about that. The next step is to notify, right? This is where you create your communication channels, right? Video, chat rooms, everything. If there's a Jira, if you have a Jira project for incidents, create the Jira for the incident as well. And then next is communication, right? This occurs obviously throughout the all the incident steps, and this includes all the information recorded by the scribe, and it also includes the incident status. This is where the status page is updated. The incident status is moved from monitoring to whatever the next one is. And yeah, it goes through the entire process, but obviously I need to add it to the list. So there it is. And then next you need to triage, right? This is about resolving the incident, right? So the actual action, that's where it happens, where you are going to actually troubleshoot the problem. So the incident commander's role is to coordinate all the SMEs to determine what the root cause is and to fix it. So after you determine the root cause, now is time to remediate, right? So let's say the SMEs have found what the issue is and then they push a fix. If you have any break glass procedures, right, for your release processes, like you have procedures to speed up releases for emergencies, this is where you do it as well. You can also speed up releases using like your known mechanisms. Next is to write an incident report. You can have an internal and an external incident report. An incident report is, like I mentioned, a way for you to communicate what happened and how it's never going to happen again, pretty much. So the internal report is obviously going to be more detailed, can include sensitive stuff, but the external report is for your key stakeholders to know what went wrong and what you did to resolve it. And then the next thing is to now do incident reviews. So your incident reviews can occur over a cycle, right? It can help to uncover long-running issues in your organization that needs to be prioritized. Um, Sorry, about the incident reviews. This is usually undertaken by engineering leaders, so it kind of helps management understand what needs to be prioritized. But I'll recommend if your company already has incident reviews, you should join them, right? Because it will help you understand what the problems are and it will help you grow as an engineer or as just someone on the team. Then the next thing, you have your incident response process. I think I'm going to run out of time soon. But if you have your incident response process, the next thing you need to do is to optimize the process, right? So the first thing is to practice, right? I'll recommend doing mock incidents to help people understand their roles and things they need to do. At Paystack, we found like a bunch of value from doing this, and we had a lot of fun doing it. We gamify some of the incidents, mock incidents as well, and people just like enjoy to act. People like to be actors. So this was fun to do, and it also helps like relieve pressure because if during the incidents you've practiced before, you are more confident and you can resolve like the incidents faster. Next is to automate, right? There are a lot of things that have been mentioned in the process, right? But there are a lot of wins you can get from automation, right? So you can have an internal Slack command, right, that can kick off the incident, right? That can set up the channel, create all the threads, start the video call, all those kinds of things. Again, this depends on your company and what is important to you. You can also automate triggering the incident response process directly from PagerDuty as well. Check out the course if you're interested in that. And then it also depends on your setup, right? So my advice here is look for the things that are manual in the incident response process and automate them because you don't want to have to be doing that when you are thinking about solving like an incident. Next is you should always set up process reminders, right? People will forget the process. It is fine. Like just expect that it will happen, right? So for instance, when the status has not been updated in a while, you can have a bot that's like just sends a friendly message to the channel that says, hey, this incident has not been updated in a while. What's going on, right? That will also help to make your process cleaner because you would expect that people will forget the process and you need to resolve that. Right. So now company Y has like an incident response process. The benefits are like very, very clear. Your mean time to resolve is reduced. Your incidents don't last for as long as they used to last before. And then your customers now appreciate knowing what's going on, right? They know that if there's something happening, they will know what is happening and they won't be kept in the dark. Especially if you're like a very important system like financial services system where people are quick to go to Twitter to complain. The next thing is this constant feedback cycle of doing incident reviews helps prioritize reliability in your company in general. Everyone knows what the long running problems are in the company and how to resolve them and how they're resolved. And then you have fewer incidents. So in general, based on like our model of resilience, that our fancy model, we have sorry, it's in. We have now we're now further away from the accident boundary, um, which means that the company is less likely to have incidents, which is very good. So the incident prevention techniques kind of push you away from like the accident boundary. And again, this model is very useful to communicate. Like if you're an engineer in a company and you are finding it difficult to prioritize reliability, you can use this model to explain to like the higher ups. I mean, especially if they like theory, that this is important and this is how this affects your reliability going forward. Right. So we have come to the end. My summary is that the first step is to admit that you have a problem. Um, if you do not admit that you have a problem and you need an incident response process, then you are not going to create one. And then when you finally admit, hopefully, you need to decide on a process that works for you, right? Based on like all the information that like has been shared today. And then there are tons of resources online as well. And then after that, you need to evangelize. You need to preach about the process and what it should be. And then you need to practice, right? Do your mock incidents as much as you can. And then create the process, use it, iterate. It's you are not going to get it right the first time, right? So yeah, this is a continuous process. It's not something that like you're going to do and like throw away. So yeah, we are done. Thank you for having me. This is where you can reach me online. If you have any questions, I haven't been looking at the chat. So let me know what your questions are. I think we might even need to leave soon because of the next thing. So I think there's only one question here, so I'll just answer it. Oh no, there is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is because there are other events already, I am going to hang out. I'm going to be around throughout the rest of the day. So I'm going to come back to the chat and reply the chat. But I want everyone to go to the stage because I can see that the stage is live. So yeah, thank you so much. If you have any questions, reach out in this QA section. But yeah, thank you for having me. Bye.
All right. Thanks everyone for attending. Please let's go to the stage. Thank you, Okpa. All right. Bye.